Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today on Behr Builds Bikes, we're going to be putting together a GT Transeo Comp. It's a hybrid, it's gray, it's a large frame, should be relatively easy. There's not a lot of stuff that has to go on it. It's just a basic hybrid, but it is one of the more comfortable ones. So we're going to get this thing unpacked, we're going to get her up in the stand, and we're going to get her built. So let's crack right into it. So I'm not sure if you can hear it right now, but it is pouring rain outside, and hopefully it won't affect the audio too much. But as it goes, we're gonna get the bike out of the box, get her up into the stand like we always do, and then we're gonna get her unpacked. So without further ado, we're gonna rip the box open. We're gonna be very careful of the staples along the inside edge of the first flap. A little bit of packing material, and the bike comes right out. We're going to lean her against the stand. We're going to use our box for cardboard, and we have our parts box. So with our side cut pliers, we're going to cut the seat post with the seat off the frame. You can leave the packing on if we want to. It's not going to make that much of a difference. And we're going to make sure that our clamp is sized properly to hold up the bike once it's in the stand. So from here, I'm going to move the camera over so that you can see the unpacking a little bit better, and we'll do that in fast forward. So let me get the camera moved and we'll continue. So from here, we're going to go ahead and remove the cap covering the seat tube. We're going to get our assembler's grease on our little brush and get that down in there so that we don't have to worry about the seat post becoming fused. Plastic cap goes in with the recycling. We are going to put the seat into the frame. We're going to tighten up the bolt on the quick release. I'm going to lock it down. It does have to support the whole weight. You don't want it sliding out, and lock that in place. So from here, we're going to go ahead, we're going to take everything off the bike, all the packing materials, cut all the zip ties, and we're going to pretty much get it ready to assemble. This, as we always do, we're going to do in fast forward. So from here, ready, set, go, and I'll see you on the other side. So one of my personal preferences when assembling these types of bikes, they're packed with the stem facing down right now. And since it is a large frame, I would rather flip the stem over so that it's pointing upwards to give a little more ride height. A lot of people come in and ask if they could raise the handlebars, and because it's a threadless stem, you can't. So we're gonna hold up on the fork because we don't want it dropping out of the headset. And with a 5mm, we're going to loosen the preload screw on the top cap of the stem. Now the holding nuts on either side are already loose. They come that way from the factory. So all we have to do is lift the stem up, flip it over, and put it back on. Then put our cap back on. And we're not letting it slide down and get the bearings all out of whack and all that. We're just going to basically snug this back up. We don't need it too tight, but we want it to be able to turn. And just for safety's sake, I'm going to tighten down, not completely, just snug, the two clamp bolts on either side. just so it can't drop out. We're taking all that out of play. Now we're going to take the front cap off so we can get the handlebar up in there. And this is a 4mm Allen. And we'll take the bolts completely out, one at a time, until we get to the last one. And we'll hold on to that while we take that last nut out and drop the tool. Now from here, we're going to take our whole handlebar assembly and rotate it up so that the cables are routed properly, and we're going to put our cap right back on. Start the bolts by hand. We're not looking to get anything completely configured at this point. We're just putting this into a basic assembly. You know, when we do this production style, I actually use a power drill with a 4mm Allen in the tip. But then again, it's real easy to strip these bolts out, so please be very careful if you are going to use power tools while assembling. It's not recommended for the novice to do that. And I'm going to go kind of crisscross on the pattern of how I'm tightening these down. And I'm just getting them barely snug. I'm not going crazy getting them super tight. Just don't want them letting the handlebar slide out. And one of the other things that I want to try and pay attention to is that the gap in the cap between the top and the bottom are equal. That there's the same amount in those gaps, top and bottom, because it gives better holding force for the clamping of the front cap into the stem so that the bars don't move. I'm going to kind of tilt the bars somewhat where we think they're going to want to be. And like I said, these are only going to be just snug enough to keep everything from moving. Do a little crisscross pattern to make sure they're cinched up so it doesn't move anymore. We still have to route our brake cable. I'm going to turn this a little bit and show you from the factory, the adjuster barrel that's here is kind of loose. So I'm going to turn it counterclockwise to get it to go all the way in. I want it bottomed out before I try to set the tension of this cable. And then this cable I'm going to run through the middle of all the others, and I still have to loosen up this holding clip that's on the fork. All right, so as you saw, I ran it through the front clip on there, through the inside of the fork. We're going to come in from the back of the caliper, run it down, seat the cable housing itself into the adjuster barrel, make sure that that's cinched up. We're going to loosen the holding nut on the caliper, and the brake cable will slide right through like it's its own little tunnel. Let's see if we can come around this way so you can see it fits right down inside here. And hopefully in post I'm going to zoom in on that. The two holding bolts, this one and this one, here and here, really need to be loosened so that the caliper can slide back and forth. Because this wheel has never been in the frame, and if you jam the rotor in there, it's going to bend the rotor and it's going to make getting the wheel straight a nightmare. So for right now, I'm just going to put a little bit of tension on the brake. Just pull up a little bit and cinch up on the holding bolt for the cable. Now from here, we're going to get the skewer in the front wheel. I'm going to inflate the tire as well. It's another process we get to learn today because it actually has a Presta valve, and we're going to show you how to do that. We're going to get the skewer into it and then get it up into the frame. So let's move the camera again and give you a better perspective on what's going on here. Okay, so Presta valve school. First thing we're going to do is take the cap off. Because with the cap on, you can't get any air in. Now there's the little lock that is at the end of the valve. We're just gonna rotate that out till it's at the end of its travel. And we take our Presta valve adapter. We're gonna put it so that the fat side is towards the rim. Let's see it better this way. Do it left-handed for you. And we're just gonna screw that on almost till it stops. I mean, there's a rubber O-ring in there. It should be all right. So, take our air hose. And again, I'm doing this left-handed, so hopefully this will work out. We're gonna add a little bit of air at a time. We're gonna make sure that the tire is seated all the way around the bead. We don't wanna, blow it off the rim. You can see it go up. It's getting a little bit more firm. Now these particular tires, they tell you right on the sidewall, right on here, I don't know if you can read that on the camera, but it's 50 PSI is the recommended, 75 PSI is the maximum. Otherwise you're gonna feel every crack in the pavement or wherever you're riding. So, once you have the tire properly inflated, firm, not hard, you're gonna take the adapter back off again. We're going to tighten down that little lock. So you can see it that way. And we're going to put our cap back on. And make sure that our collar is seated right up against the wheel. Check your bead all the way around. Make sure that it's nice and even and that the tire is not poking out of it anywheres or that it's not tucked up in there. Now we're going to open our parts box and we're going to get our skewer out, which is about the only reason I use a utility knife at this point. We have our skewer. You see the different pieces of it, the base, the spring, the other spring, the cap. We're gonna hold this together. We're gonna take this cap off. And then we're gonna take this spring off. I'm gonna put just a little bit of grease on the shaft. That way, while it's in the axle, it's not gonna give us any issue. Now the handle side goes on the side with the rotor. So that goes in. We're going to make sure that there's no excess grease on there that's going to fly off and get on that rotor. So you can see it's been cleaned up. We're going to put our spring, narrow side towards the hub, fat side away from it, screw the cap on, and then this will actually go into the fork, sliding into the brake rotor. And then we'll tighten down while holding and cinch it up. Make sure it's straight in the frame, that it's in line with the top of the fork. It's going to be rubbing against the brake because the brake can move, but we're going to adjust that in a second. So for this part of the adjustment, what I generally tend to do is grab the front brake lever and pull up on that cable. Get it locked down to where the wheel doesn't move. Give it a little wiggle, that way it'll help center out your brake caliper. Now we're going to tighten just to the point where it's touching. We're not locking this down. Both the holding bolts. We're going to release. You can still hear it rubbing. We're going to use a flashlight to see where the adjustment has to be made in the caliper. to shine a light through the caliper, and we can see that the top needs to be moved over just a slight bit. So we'll loosen it, push it over. I'm looking down through the top of the caliper. And then the bottom has to go over that way. At that point, I'm not sure if you can see that or not. The rotor is not touching the brake pads on either side. And so another good indicator that the rotor is lined up and that there is no more issue and that it's adjusted properly is that it doesn't make any noise. It's not grinding on the rotor on either side. It's spinning freely. It's stopping really well. You can see it only takes that much of the brake to actually get it to stop fully. So now we're going to take and cut the excess cable. I like to leave at least a couple inches on there just so that you have something to grab a hold of in the event that you need to pull it through. And we're going to put a cable crimp on it. Just a couple little crimps on there. Now that it's in place, we're going to make sure that it's completely locked down and that it's not going to move. And one more test, no noise. So from here, we're going to move on to installing our pedals. We'll take them out of our package. And we're going to move the camera over to where you can see better as I put these on the bike. All right, so we've got our pedals. One has a red R sticker, one has a green L sticker, right and left. We're going to put a little bit of grease on the spindles. We're going to start threading our pedal into the crank arm, clockwise motion. Sometimes you can spin the cage of the pedal, sometimes you actually have to grab it by the shaft and get it to seat in there, pedal it around till you can't get it to move anymore. You do the same thing on the other side. It's going to go in a clockwise motion when reaching through the bike like this. You can pedal it around. You can get our 15mm pedal wrench. You can lock it onto the spindle there. The same thing on this side. Once it's right where you want to make sure that that is really torqued on there, because the last thing you want is a pedal coming off while somebody is taking it for a test drive. All right, so now we're going to move back to getting the gears adjusted. All right, so we're going to start with our rear gears. We're going to start it in the highest gear, and we're going to give it one click. You see how it's struggling to get up into that next gear? Well, that means we have to turn counterclockwise on the cable tension. And then we will drop it back down again. And one click, and she goes back up into the next gear. A little more struggling means a little bit more tension. So then we'll drop her down both gears. Give it another shot. Seems to be climbing through. One click to go down, 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 down. Now I say down when it's actually going up a gear, going from first to second to third to fourth to fifth to sixth to seventh. Once we have those aligned, we're going to make sure that our stop screws, which are here and here, this is low, which is this one, this is high, which is this one. We're going to make sure that that is as tight as it needs to be right at that point. And we're going to go all the way back up to the first gear again. We're going to make sure that this one is in as far as it needs to be to keep the chain from going into the spokes. Now we're going to go and adjust the front gears. All right, so this is a little bit more difficult to film, but we're going to give it a shot here. We're in the smallest of the 3 chain rings. You can see the chain is evenly between the bail of the front derailleur. We're going to try and click one time to get it into the second chain ring, which we have successfully done, and you can see that it is not rubbing on the bail. And we're going to go up to the top chain ring, and everything seems to be good there. Now, if we had any issues, we would be adjusting the cable tension at the shifter on itself. We do have a low and a high tension screw. Low is to keep it from going further than the small chain ring. High is to keep it from going out into the chain ring. So from here, I think we've got it pretty well adjusted, and we're going to get ready for final assembly. So from here, there's only a few more things we really need to address, one of which is this little clip that is the cable guide. Sometimes we use zip ties for these, sometimes we just, actually use the factory clip. It just keeps the cable from getting bound up in the handlebars. Last thing in the parts box that we have to deal with is, in fact, the reflectors. So we're going to put those on, just connect them in place. Put the Phillips head screw in there. Now these do come with plugs over all the little bottle cage and different rack mounting areas that are on the bike. Any place that would actually let water intrude into the frame. They do come with all the rack bolts and the bottle cage bolts and all that stuff as well. I mean, there's 2 here, 1 here, 1 here. It comes with all the screws, which you can include with the bike if it's going to be for sale, but for the most part I leave the rubber plugs in because it's keeping water out of the frame, which ultimately is a bad idea to have water in your frame. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the handlebars are nice and straight with the front wheel. We're going to tighten down the clamp bolts firmly this time. Once we get her on the floor, we're going to make sure that the controls are at the right angle, that they're comfortable. Everything else has been addressed on this bike. We're going to tighten down the 4 bolts in the front, and this one is pretty much ready for the floor. I hope you've enjoyed watching this particular bike. This is one of my favorite hybrid gravel bikes that GT makes. And if you want more information, they are on the website at gt.com. Hope that this has done, a little bit for your ability to adjust and tweak things that come on these, relatively mid-range grade bicycles. They're not hydraulic, but they do have, better than normal features. And I hope to see you in the next one. Have a great day.